Okay, so this month's tier 10 is about investment vehicles, which one to use. And it can be quite tricky for the average person to have a look at all the different types of investment vehicles that are available and to know which one is actually going to work for the purposes of your goals. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to take a fairly high level look at different types of investment vehicles. So we're talking about investment vehicles that the average person is going to use. Obviously, there are things like bank accounts, which we all have. We're not going to consider that an investment vehicle. Things like share portfolios that, although Winsome Wealth can facilitate and give access to, we're going to talk more about the type of everyday investment vehicles that people use. So we see some of them here on the slide: your tax-free savings, your retirement annuities, your unit trusts, your endowment plans. Offshore, what do we do with offshore? Some people are more interested in that kind of thing. So we're really focusing on the type of investment that you might want to put a monthly amount into, or maybe your annual bonus, and be able to use it to save for a specific goal. So I am going to generalize about certain aspects because the webinar is not meant to be specific advice to an individual. The webinar is more meant to give you a high-level background knowledge of how different investment vehicles work, so that when you sit down with someone and you want to then make a decision about which vehicle to use, you already at least have some sort of background understanding. Okay, so we're going to start with the foundation. Always a good place to start if you're trying to build something. We first need to understand the foundation of most investment tools. And I'm going to use an illustration to explain it. We're going to talk about unit trusts. All right, so we have Stundy. Stundy needs to get from A to B, but he doesn't have the capital amount to be able to buy himself a vehicle. So what does Stundy have to do? Well, Stundy needs to get together with a whole bunch of other people who want to travel in the same direction, and they're all going to put their money together. They're going to pool their money together, and that's going to allow them to be able to get onto a vehicle that travels in the direction they want to go. So even though each one of these individuals by themselves can't afford to buy that vehicle, because they come together and pool their money together, they can now all afford to travel on that vehicle to the destination they want to go. And the concept of a unit trust is very similar. Essentially, we have a group of people who want to go in the same direction, want to achieve the same goal, but they might not have enough money to go and buy the individual units that make up the investment that they want on their own. So they pool their money together. They pool their money together in something called a unit trust. So what does the unit trust facilitate? What does it help them to do? Well, it helps them to be able to have access to things that they wouldn't be able to have access to otherwise. Like Stundy could only get on the taxi by paying a pooled fare with everybody else. He couldn't afford to buy the taxi himself. Apologies for that. Our internet randomly went down. Give me a second. Okay, so apologies for that. As I was saying, so you might not have enough money to go out and buy Microsoft shares as an individual, or oil, barrels of oil, or a property. But by pooling your money together with a whole bunch of other people, and that pooled amount of money is then enough money for those types of assets to be bought, property, shares, oil, whatever it is. And each of you then get to be a part owner of that investment basket. That is the essential idea behind a unit trust, that we can pool the money together and then go buy those assets. And every single person who has money in that basket then becomes a part owner of that unit trust. It's called a unit trust because the parts of that basket are divided into units. And you become an owner of a certain number of units, depending how much money you have put into that investment. So the basket, the unit trust, the value of that is based on what it has bought into, what's inside it. You as an investor, an individual, own a unit, a piece of that basket. The price of your unit is decided by the value of the basket itself. So every single unit that you own has a price. If we put all the units together, it gives us the total value of the unit trust fund, divided into different units that you own, and each of those units has a price. The value of that fund will move up and down, and it'll move up and down depending on what is in the basket. Okay, so if the value of properties goes up, the value of your fund might go up. Then the price of the unit that you own will move up or down. So if, for example, the price of the unit is R1 and you have put R100 in, you will own 100 units. If the price of that unit then goes to R1.50, you still own 100 units, but now the value of your investment is R150. And that's how a unit trust works. Each unit has a price, and sometimes the price moves up and sometimes the price moves down. You still own the same number of units, but the price of the units changes constantly. Now, one of the things that I get asked quite often is about the riskiness of a unit trust. So people will say to me, but if the unit trust is the foundation that underlies all these different investment vehicles, surely a unit trust is dangerous. It's not a safe thing to invest in. And it's a bit of a misconception because really a unit trust is a basket. It has no risk level on its own. What decides whether it's risky or not is what's inside the basket. So you could have a unit trust that only has cash in it. It's invested in money market. Then it has the same risk essentially as the money market at the bank. There's not a lot of risk involved at all. Or you could have a unit trust that owns small cap companies in Venezuela. Okay, then it's very, very risky. You might get good returns, you might not. So the unit trust in itself, that becomes the foundation for the different types of investment vehicles that most of us would use, in itself is just a basket. It's just a concept that allows a whole bunch of people to pool their money and be able to go and get access to assets they wouldn't otherwise be able to get access to. What decides whether it's going to be risky or not is what's inside that basket. And that is a different decision to what investment vehicle should I use. That decision is made usually after you've decided what investment vehicle you're going to use, depending on the process that your advisor uses. Okay, so what about the investment vehicles? So what we've looked at is a unit trust being the foundation of all different types of investments. Okay, so we understand that. Underneath, they all kind of look the same. So how do we now go from that to different types of investment vehicles? Well, we first need to see that the engine, the unit trust on all of these vehicles is the same. Right? As you can see in this illustration, the chassis, the engine, it's exactly the same. But what happens is that we wrap it with a different body. And the different body that we wrap it with, they look quite different. Okay, we've got a sports car, we've got a bakkie, SUV. You're going to use those for different purposes. And that's really where it comes to how we choose an investment vehicle. What is the purpose of this investment? Because the same engine is driving everybody, yes, but depending on why we're investing, the goal of the investment, we're going to need a different vehicle. You will not use a sports car to go up a mountain. Okay, not if you're making smart decisions. All right, so what types of things would we then want to take into account when we look at different investment vehicles? Well, there's quite a lot, okay, and I don't want you to get overwhelmed here because you don't need to memorize any of this. You just need to be aware of the types of things that you would consider when choosing an investment vehicle. I always say to people, unless you know something about this, you probably should be speaking to an advisor, and preferably a certified financial planner, where you can find a list of them on the FPI's website, the Financial Planning Institute. Find somebody in your area that you can deal with. So when you invest, you're going to choose the wrapper. So remember, the engine's the same. It's the body, the wrapper, that we change. So you're going to choose the body or the wrapper based on a few different things. It's got to meet the goal of that investment. We're going to think about things like tax treatment. We're going to think about how can we contribute? Can you do it monthly? Can you do as much as you like? When can you access the money? Are there restrictions on when you can put money in and out? Who actually owns that vehicle? Yeah, because sometimes you invest in a vehicle that's in your name. Sometimes you invest in a vehicle that's in your company's name, such as a pension fund. What about the risk, the guarantees? Is this a type of investment that has some sort of underlying guarantee? Is that what you need? Does that meet the goal that you're investing for? Income options, payout mechanisms, estate planning, beneficiary nominations, and the rules around what you can invest in. So, for example, a retirement fund, anything that invests for retirement has specific rules that regulate what you're allowed to invest in. There's only so much you can put offshore. There's only so much you can put in equities. Tax-free savings accounts also have certain rules around them. So there's certain investment structures, your more complex structures, that are not allowed in a tax-free savings account. So these are the types of things that you're going to consider when you look at which wrapper, which vehicle body am I going to use. Now, if we have a look at different types of bodies, so what I've done here is I've taken like the 4 that seem to be the most common. Now, again, you don't need to really memorize this or know it all offhand. We will send out a copy of this recording afterwards, and you'll be able to go and have a look at this again. But basically what you can see here is we've got some of the considerations: tax, contributions, liquidity, costs, estate planning, and then the different vehicles: tax-free savings, endowment, retirement annuity, and a unit trust. And then we've got the considerations of each of those. So now, how do I choose which one to use? And it really comes down to the goal, the purpose of this investment. We don't use a bakkie for a racetrack, and we don't use a sports car for a mountain. So you need to have the goal, the purpose clearly in your mind in order to be able to choose the right investment vehicle. Because if you don't know why you're investing, then chances are you might choose the wrong thing. And what we wouldn't want is, for example, you're saving for a deposit on a house, and 3 years go by and you find the perfect house. And then you come back and you go, okay, please, please, please give me the money I've saved up so far. and turns out you can't access it. There's a 5-year restriction. Can't take your money out. Okay, because that's a mess. Now you put the money in, you can't get it out. So you need to know, okay, what is the purpose of this money? When are the chances I'm going to want to access it? Do I need access at all times? How much am I looking to contribute? What am I going to spend this money on? Those types of questions, so that you can choose the right vehicle to make sure that you don't end up in a situation where now you want to get your money out and you can't, or you want to get your money out and there's like 40% tax being applied to it. So understanding the goal, the purpose of why you're putting money away in the first place is important. And maybe your goal, your purpose is just because, and that's okay too, because just because is a thing. Some of us put money away, we don't really have a specific reason. We just want to know that we've saved up some money. That's fine. But then let's use the right vehicle. All right. So we'll come back to talking a little bit more about which ones to use for what and how we go through that process of reasoning. But when it comes to choosing, like I said, the goal is the most important factor. That's number one. Okay, we don't choose a investment vehicle based on its tax treatment if it doesn't suit the goal that we're saving for. All right, so I'm saving for a wedding. I'm going to use a retirement annuity because my contributions are tax deductible. Well, that's silly because you can't get your money out. It's a retirement annuity. So the goal is the first thing that you think about. That's the most important. Everything else follows that. The tax, the contributions, everything. First, define what is the goal. Then you can worry about the other stuff. Now, fees. Okay. Fees are the enemy of return. Fees can eat up most of the return on your investment. And I see this often. Very well-meaning people who have taken out an investment because they want to do the right thing. They want to put money away. They know it's the responsible financial decision to make. And then they sit down 5 years, 6 years, 10 years later, and they say to me, but I'm sure there's less money here than what I put in the first place. How is that possible? How does that happen? Well, fees are the biggest problem that we see on investments. And there are very different types of investments that are available out there. And regardless of the type of investment that you're buying, you could buy a tax-free savings account that has horrific fees and a tax-free savings account that has very good fees. Okay, so the vehicle is not what defines the fees necessarily. You need to be aware of what the fees are at the start when you get the quote for that investment. So let me show you an example. Okay, I hope you can see this clearly. So every single time someone takes an investment, you're going to get a quote, and that quote has to have something on it called the EAC, okay, effective annual cost. That's the best way to measure the fees, the EAC. They'll show you fees in 6 different ways, okay, but the 6 different ways, none of that matters. You look for the EAC, effective annual cost. That's the one you want to look at. Now, if we have a look at this particular investment, okay, so I am a financially responsible person. I'm taking out an investment because I know that putting money away is a good thing to do. Fantastic. Okay, so I go and I sign this thing and I take out this investment. Now, here we have year one of the investment. What is going to be the impact of fees, of charges on my money in year one? All right, look at the EAC, 24.2%. So in year one, that investment is going to cost you 24.2% of the money you put in it. Maybe the market does 50% and you still make money. Possible. But what if the market only does 5%? You're going to be worse off for having put money away. And not because the market did badly, simply because the fees on this thing are so horrific that, I mean, it's almost unethical. But investments like this exist. Okay, so you need to be really, really careful about what you're taking. And as a caution, generally, investments that come through insurance companies cost more than investments that come directly from investment companies. Okay, so just be very careful when you get a quote in front of you, look for that EAC, because you don't want to be paying exorbitant fees on an investment. This investment after 15 years is still costing this person 4.5% per annum. Okay, and if the market does 10% and you're giving up 4.5% in fees, what is the point of this exercise? Really, you're wasting your time here. And don't be sold by these investments that have, oh, if you keep it for 10 years, you get this extra bonus that we give you back. The mechanisms that are used to derive those bonuses are often the dividends that have been stripped out that you were entitled to in the first place and then paid back to you as a dividend. So please, just keep it simple. The fee should be low. We don't need bells and whistles and tricks and magic shows. We just need an investment with low fees and decent returns. Simple. So if I show you now a different type of investment, the effective annual cost on this one, 1.2%. After 10 years, 1.23%. Now, why are the structures so different? Because on this particular investment, there's a whole lot of layers of fees that are being added because of the number of people involved in providing this investment. Okay, you'll see that there's a very big advice fee. So this advisor has taken an upfront commission, part upfront commission on this investment. They make their money when you sign, which means they're less incentivized to look after you long term. And it doesn't really matter whether your investment grows or not, they're still going to make their money up front. So personally, and it is a very personal, let me make that clear, personal view is that an advisor should not take upfront fees from an investment. Because if you and the investor's interests are to be aligned, then both of you should need the investment to grow in order to make money. Okay. This administration fee of 11.3%. I mean, for goodness sake, what are they doing? For that much money, I'm not sure what they give you exactly, but that's pretty horrific. Okay. A reasonable fee on an investment is about 1.5% is okay. You should be fairly happy with that. Depending on the type of investment, if it's an endowment structure where there has to be a thing called a life license, it could push it to closer to 2, but anything above 2, you're overpaying, really. Especially things like unit trust, tax-free savings accounts, they should easily be able to come in at under 1.5%. All right, so fees, very important. Now, let's look at a couple examples. So I want to invest, okay. What is my goal? Remember, that's where I start. My goal is retirement. Okay, well, there's 2 different things I could use. So this is the thought process you're going to follow. What is my goal? Retirement. Okay, what could I use? What makes sense for retirement? Well, a retirement annuity is kind of obvious because you get your tax deduction up front. So that's great. Every time you contribute, you're getting a tax deduction. But I do have to remember that when I take money out one day, potentially I'm going to pay tax on it. So that's a negative. Also, I'm going to be restricted about how much money I can take out of this as a lump sum. Because when I retire, I can only take a portion as a lump sum. The rest has to provide an income. And now sometimes what we see people in a situation where the lump sum portion isn't enough to, for example, settle the debt that they have. But the monthly income they're going to be taking out isn't enough to service the debt either. Then they're really stuck because it doesn't matter which way they go, they actually are going to end up having to either sell a house or a car or something because they can't get the money to do what they need the money to do because of the restrictions. So if I say, okay, well, I like the tax thing, that's great. I don't like the restrictions so much and how much money I can take out. Okay, well, the other tax-friendly investment is a tax-free savings account. And those work best over the long period because in order to benefit from getting the returns tax-free, I need to get returns, right? And the longer I invest for, the more the returns I'm going to have. So ultimately, I'm going to get the best out of a tax-free savings account by investing for the long term. Investing in a tax-free savings account for 2 years doesn't really make sense because, like, will there even be enough growth for me to pay tax on? So I could use a tax-free savings account. It's great. Okay, I'm not going to get the upfront tax deduction, but I will get a tax-free payout when I take my money out. but there are restrictions on how much I can put in there. So as an advisor, if I was sitting with someone who was saying, okay, I want to put money towards retirement, I'd first say to them, right, well, how much is going into your employer fund? Have we maximized that? What do the costs look like? Is it a good fund? Okay, have you got a retirement annuity in your own name to sort of buffer that pension fund or that retirement fund with your employer? Okay, you've got those. What about a tax-free savings account? We could do that as well to subsidize the retirement. So that's the kind of thought process. What about education? So education is another big one that a lot of people come and ask me about. And I find it's one of those ones where a lot of people end up investing in things that are way overpriced and they end up making no money out of the investment. So education, you can use an endowment, all right? And the average person is going to speak to somebody that works at one of the insurance companies and they're probably going to try and sell them an endowment, all right? Be careful though, endowments come with higher costs because of the extra layers that are involved in an endowment. Okay, also potentially a higher tax rate because yes, the endowment is taxed within the wrapper and that's beautiful, but maybe your personal tax rate or your child's personal tax rate, if you're putting it in your child's name, is lower than the endowment tax rate. Then why are you using an endowment? Why are you paying extra fees for something that isn't benefiting you from a tax point of view? So tax-free savings accounts can work very well for education as well. Like we said, very good long-term savings tools, but there's the restriction on the contribution. So there's only so much you can put in. Now you want to put for you and you want to put for your child. So maybe you open it in your child's name. There's things you need to consider there as well. So this is the kind of process that we would usually go through with somebody when they say, okay, I want to invest for. Then we go, okay. These are the possible tools, positives, negatives. Let's pick one. And they pick one. And that kind of a process is best had, obviously, with an advisor that you sit down and you discuss it and you go through it so that you can make a good decision. Then what? Okay, so you've chosen your vehicle. Right, you've got the bakkie and you're going up the mountain. Then you need to choose the mix of assets that's going to go in that basket. Okay, so you've got your tax-free savings account. You understand that the foundation of it is a unit trust because it's the foundation of most investments. All right, now what do I invest in? Okay, and that's where obviously having someone guide you is quite important. I'm not going to talk about different asset classes today because it's not the topic of this webinar. We will have a webinar on it at a later stage. But basically now you make the decision on how much risk do I want to take, how much cash, how many shares, local shares, offshore shares. This is the stage at which you start making that decision. And that decision also very much ties up to the goal or the purpose of the investment in the first place. So that would essentially be the next step in the decision that you're making. Okay, so summary. Unit trusts are the foundation of most investment vehicles. So let's just understand that. Whether you're buying the RA, you're buying the tax-free savings account, you're buying the endowment, underneath, basically, they're all a unit trust. Okay, you can just buy the unit trust too. Works perfectly. The risk of the investment is not based on which vehicle you're choosing. It's based on what's in the basket that you're investing in. Okay, so a unit trust is not more risky than an endowment. An endowment is not more risky than a tax-free savings account. It doesn't work like that. They're just different vehicles with the same engine. Which engine you stick in there, probably going to have a little bit more to do with how much risk there is, what you're actually investing in. Choosing the right vehicle is important because it needs to align with your investment goals. You don't want to end up with restrictions on being able to take your own money because you chose the wrong investment vehicle. And finally, costs are crucial. Please do not buy expensive investments. We want the investment to benefit you, not the people who are selling it to you. That is a pointless exercise. All right, and that is our tea at 10 for today. So if anyone's got any questions, we'll be happy to take some questions at this stage.